Hi folks, this will be a two-part video series dealing with copyist errors and estimations in the Bible. This will be also a part of an overall series dealing with Bible inerrancy and inspiration. In my previous series titled Bible Inerrancy, I answered some specific questions. Does our modern day Bibles contain errors? Yes, they do. Does that mean the Bible is not inspired? No, it doesn't. Does that mean that we cannot trust the Bible or derive meaning or understanding as to what God wants us to do? No, it doesn't. And I offered up a number of reasons why we do not have inerrant-free copies of the Bible, and gave many religious and philosophical reasons for that, and yet gave a number of reasons why we can still have confidence in our Bible as to what it is God wants us to do. Now, in this part of the series, I want to deal specifically with copyist errors. And I would like to just clarify something. I've noticed here on YouTube that when we talk about errors in the Bible, a lot of skeptics and critics like to point out logical or moral errors. When I say that we have errors in our modern day Bibles, I am specifically talking about transcription or copyist errors. I do not believe that there are moral or logical errors, and I'm planning a number of video series upcoming that would deal with a lot of the different controversies or objections skeptics have in regards to perceived moral or logical contradictions. But for this series specifically, I want to deal with copyist errors and transcription errors. As I acknowledge, those do exist in our modern day copies of the Bible. Now, to begin with, many critics are completely indifferent to the principles of textual criticism. They reject all explanations involving copyist error, even though they are the same type used by textual critics in secular studies to resolve difficulties. And this being the case, we may expose the absurdity of their arguments by seeing what they would result in if carried to their logical conclusion. The works of Tacitus, a major historical document from which we derive ancient Roman history, contain a known numerical error which has been faulted to a copyist mistake. Two geographic locations are described as being 25 miles apart, but we know that the locations are actually 125 miles apart, not 25. Hence, Tacitus and classical scholars deduce that a copyist error changed the original CXXB to XXB. Now, using this example, consider what one skeptic's objections do to the science of textual criticism. A skeptic might reply, the common apologetic defense that somebody copied something incorrectly is wholly unsupported in light of the fact that the originals no longer exist. How do they know they were copied wrong? Likewise, the original Tacitus no longer exists. How do we know that it was copied wrong? The skeptic replies, if the conflict exists in the copies, then it is logical to assume it was present in the originals as well, absent evidence as to the contrary. In response, a notion like this would bring all textual criticism to a screeching halt. So then, it is logical to assume that an errant Tacitus was in the original. We have no evidence to the contrary, not even a variant or other document with another number, as we do in the Bible in most cases. Of course, the skeptic goes on to say, the apologist can hardly argue copyist error to explain contradictions and then assert inerrancy in all other parts of the Bible. In response, we cannot use copyist error to explain Tacitus then to assert his reliability elsewhere. The argument makes no sense whatsoever. Our writer says more about this subject, which is highly repetitive, calling such explanations as a gimmick or an excuse. But the bottom line is that there are certified textual critical methods for resolving such problems in ancient text, and our skeptic is not even remotely informed on these. As further proof, let's look at some statements from the Skeptical Biblical Inerrancy newsletter. This is from issue 105. The author quotes a Christian saying, there are only 10,000 places where variants occur, and most of them are matters of spelling and word order. There are less than 40 places in the New Testament where we really are not certain of the original or certain of the reading in the original, but none of these have any effect on central doctrine of faith. Note, the problem is not that we don't know what the text is, but we're not certain which text has the right reading. To this, the skeptic replies that the authors admit that there are at least 10,000 places in which manuscripts supposedly duplicating the alleged originals contradict one another. That's a lot of conflict for what is supposed to be God's perfect word. Now, in response, I think we just need to hold the phone for a second. This says nothing about places where 10,000 manuscripts conflict each other. This speaks of 10,000 variants. A variant is counted as any place where any manuscript differs from another manuscript. But the skeptic continues. Secondly, since the alleged originals no longer exist, and with so much disagreement among the allegedly accurate documents, there is no way scholars could ever know for sure what the originals actually said. Any version on the market must be a product of the educated guesses, consensus, and weighing the validity of the manuscripts. Again, in response, secular textual critics who operate under the same basic rules as the biblical ones would be very surprised to hear that there's no way to know for sure what the original said. Of course, one might wildly speculate that the given work of Tacitus on history was once a guide for dental hygiene practices, but the level of certainty for recovery is far, far higher than the implication above or before insist. And so how do we discover a copyist error? An overriding supposition in textual criticism assumes error in copying before assuming error in the original. This is simply good manners. It is arrogant and presumptuous to assume error upon the creator of the work, as it is far more likely, given the time and the number of hands an ancient document has usually passed through, that a copyist erred. This is so whether we have corroborating evidence or not. The second factor is, indeed, if there is corroborating evidence supporting that what appears to be more correct reading for Tacitus, all we have to do is the mere fact that the two locations referenced are known to be 125 miles apart. But we have better evidence for most. But we actually have better evidence for most biblical problems of this sort. What is correct? Which is correct? Let me back up here for a second. Take these two verses in the New King James or the King James, where they have not been corrected with textual critical principles. You have 1 Kings 4:26, and Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses and chariots and 12,000 horsemen. 2 Chronicles 9:25 says, and Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horsemen whom he bestowed in the chariot cities and with the king at Jerusalem. Now the question is which one is correct, or which is correct? Textual critics have determined that the second is correct and that 1 Kings has been hit by copyist error, citing as support the reading found in 2 Corinthians, archaeological data indicating that 4,000 would be a more appropriate number of stalls for a nation the size of ancient Israel, whereas 40,000 would be very excessive, and 4,000 comports better with the number of horsemen. This is a sufficient explanation, but in addition, the only difference between basically 4 and 40 is two letters, I am ending in 40, while 4 it has a singular feminine ending. Compare this now with the Skeptic's Commentary in the 127th issue of the Biblical Inerrancy newsletter, where a fellow skeptic pointed out the high probability of copyist error in this instance. First, although the skeptic goes on to state, although the alleged original no longer exists, there are thousands of manuscripts claiming to be accurate copies of the original manuscripts. When scholars decided to write the following verses, King James, Revised Standard, New American Standard, and so on, they went through either some, many, most, if not all the manuscripts, compared to what was said in each, reached a common consensus and chose 40,000 for 1 Kings and 4,000 for 2 Chronicles. In order for there to have been a copyist error, the same incorrect figure had to have been copied in scores of, if not hundreds and thousands of manuscripts, certainly not one or two. Are you saying hundreds, if not thousands, of copyists made precisely the same error when they copied 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles from the autographs? They not only copied incorrectly, but made the same erroneous change. What do you think about the odds of that happening? The attempt by apologists to pawn the problem off as one lone copyist or scribe in some monastery somewhere who happened to make one simple mistake is rather amusing in light of the fact that thousands of manuscripts involve the same verse and same mistake.